Welcome, Rowena. It's thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to spend with me and have this little fireside chat. So just to start off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself
Yeah.
and how you got this role?
Yes, certainly. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Asari. Look, I'm Managing Director of Manifest in the UK. We're a creative communications agency. We do unified campaigns for brands, brands from sort of scale ups, startup scale ups to enterprise level. And my role is to oversee the UK businesses. So we have two studios, one in London, one in Manchester. We're about 30 people in total. And so I oversee the team, across both studios and obviously the client base and the growth, the strategy, and just making sure that obviously the team, I've got a really good, strong, kind of high performing team as well that and building the culture within the business too. So that's really my role.
And what was the background for you to becoming the MD?
So I've been I've been in the advertising industry, the creative agency industry for probably 20 plus years now, actually, maybe 25 even. Um, I started off obviously out of university. I had a passion for brands and marketing, and then worked my way through lots of different agencies in that time. Started off sort of digital agencies, moved to more advertising-led agencies, doing sort of billboards and TV ads. Moved around the circuit, but really sort of between those two. So always between sort of digital agencies and then kind of advertising and sort of big creative agencies. And then I was approached about this role in particular by a former MD that I worked with, and he was an ED on the board, and there was an opportunity for an MD, and he thought I'd be a good candidate for it. So he introduced me to the CEO and just said, I think you two should chat, have a conversation and see how it goes from there. That was, brilliant. I have to say those introductions and the network kind of, that you have kind of working for you right there. Then I met Alex, our CEO, and we hit it off, and I think the chemistry felt good, and I think we both felt good about it actually. So it moved quite quickly from there. And then I was appointed as the MD last April. So I've been in the role just over a year now.
Oh wow, yeah, brilliant. Well done.
Thank
So
you.
tell us a bit about the business then, and what is there a typical client? I mean, you talked about from startup to others, but
Yeah.
what are they looking for? What they get from you?
Yeah. So most brands will come to us in a moment of change, and they're looking for an agency partner that can bring sort of strategic and creative solutions to solve their business challenges. And generally speaking, they'll come to us because they want difference, and they're looking for a partner that can help them disrupt the category, or help them develop a new sort of positioning within the marketplace, and obviously develop sort of creative work off the back of that. So typically they're the kind of clients that we work with, but they can be of all levels. So they're not always big brands. We do work with, as I mentioned, sort of, startups, scale ups as well. They have different challenges, different budgets, certainly, but also different challenges. And quite often they're looking for funding rounds, and they need us to sort of help them with their kind of like brand and positioning in the market and getting visibility, for investment. So again, I love the variety of that, the fact that it can take you into sort of quite different places every day. But similarly, we work with some brands who are global brands, and we work with them in terms of their kind of marketing presence, and that's multi-market as much as it is just in the UK as well.
Mm,
So in one day, I'm across all of those touch points across the business. That's my responsibility really to sort of make sure all of the client businesses are kind of growing in the right way, and we're helping sort of counsel strategically those relationships. So I'm literally in and out of those meetings constantly, from
mm.
big to small, and so it's really interesting and varied. No 2 days are the same for sure.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
And would you say, because it doesn't have to be quite an interesting, I'm playing with a book at the moment about business myths, and there can be a myth that every business has to have uniqueness.
yeah.
Well, a lot of businesses are similar to others. It doesn't have to be unique necessarily. But would you say there's anything particular that separates you from competitors?
I would, yeah. there's a couple of things I would say, and I think this is what attracted me to manifest actually as well. I mean, when you've been in the industry as long as I have, sort of over 20 years, you tend to get a sense of what it is that you like and what you don't, and when something's when something's genuine versus when it's just, on the website. And I got a real sense of this when I met Alex. The culture of the business, I would say, is really different, and it's inclusive. It's inclusive and it's safe. And that was really important for me, coming from, I think, agencies where I haven't always had that, if I'm honest. And you wouldn't feel that you can comfortably speak out in a meeting against the CEO or the founder if you had a different opinion around the work. Um, and that became really important to me. I think, you realize it the most when you don't have it. And so I saw with Alex, I could have those almost like transparent, kind of candid conversations. So I'd say that the culture of Manifest for our team, but also for our clients, I think they feel that when they work with us because the team dynamic is, is authentic to some extent. Um, so I think you experience that when you work with us as a client. So I think that's definitely a point of difference. I think the second thing is that we've traditionally come from a earned background, and we now do the full mix, the full 360. So, through the line marketing. There's not many agencies that can deliver work across, integrated campaigns, but also think about earned thinking as well, which is different. You have to work in a slightly different way to earn attention. If you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
media there to rely on carrying that message for you, you have to work out what's the sharp end of this, what's the angle, what's the potential story here that will get traction and get picked up in culture as well as, within the industry as well, within the press and within the client's kind of space. And we do all of that actually, which is I think quite unique in the industry. I
Mm,
think another agency that does it in the way that we do. So it's a very unified proposition, is what we call it. And it helps consolidate lots of work from clients, into one business as well. So I think we tend to do quite well with brands that are looking for all of the above in terms of support, and they may not have the bigger budgets, or they may just want one agency partner that can just handle all of that for them, and there's an efficiency there.
no, I hear that.
Yeah.
Is there something you would describe as a typical day, or is every day very varied?
I'd say there is never a typical day. It varies absolutely. What I do know every day is that I'm on the go. I know every day I will be on the go. I'm in lots of meetings, and I have to afford myself some time at the beginning of the day to make sure I have some sort of thinking time up front.
Mm,
So I do carve out a little bit of time in my morning just to get ahead of my day and address anything that's a priority first thing, because then I know after that I may be locked into sort of meetings and obviously conversations. My role is very much kind of being with the team, supporting kind of like across kind of big or small conversations actually, but that could be at any level. Um, Things always come up in the moment as well, obviously, so I need to be able to just be available, for my team when they need me to pull me into something. And so
mm,
yeah, I wouldn't say there's ever a typical day, but I have to sort of almost structure it in a way that I know that I can then still be effective in the mornings when I can carve out that time and protect my time. And then yeah, sort of make sure I'm just prioritizing the meetings that I'm in. So I'm just not in meetings where I don't need to be.
yeah, yeah.
Delegating as well as much as I can with my team so that they're empowered, and I don't want to micromanage, right? So I make sure there's a separation between us. And but yeah, I mean, I love the variety of this. That's why I continue to do it for so long. And I just love I love the mix. Every day is different, and you talk about different brands from one meeting to the next, different business challenges, looking at creative work one minute, looking at strategic work the next. And it just fires up all of the different kind of like, I guess, passions that I have actually. Like it lights me up, I have to say.
Mm.
Yeah. I
Well,
like
you got a lot of energy. I say that, a lot of energy and enthusiasm, which is always nice to
yeah,
see.
thank you.
And would would a typical day be a long day? Is it long working hours and weekends, and you're always available, or do you manage to get
No.
that? How do you get that balance?
I do balance it. I mean, I'd say that the days are long, but I don't work weekends. Absolutely not, really. I think, if there's a pitch or something, you might. you might check in on things on a weekend and just have a look at the pitch deck, for example. But other than that, no, very much not, I'd say. Um, I mean, the days, yes, they can be long. Um, but I'm committed to kind of doing what I need to do with my team. So if they need me, I'm there for it. I always try and be available for them when they need me. But generally speaking, we respect each other's time. And so most people will be offline from after sort of 6:30, I would say. And we have a policy where we don't tend to email outside of hours. You then just schedule it for the next morning. So
Mm,
nobody ever feels, even if I might be working after my daughter goes to bed, for example, just catching up on some emails, I don't expect the team to respond. And I don't want them to feel that they have to. So we schedule emails, we use that kind of tool, just so that it's, yeah, nobody feels that they need to reply to you if they see something come through. Um,
mm,
but no, look, I almost work when I choose to some extent. Obviously, I have my hours in the day and I choose to work in the evening if I want to, because it helps me just get ahead of something, or I'm in the zone sometimes, right? And you want to just, write a presentation, and I'm like, I can do it right now. I know exactly what it is I want to do. I want to just get it down. So yeah, it's more of a choice rather than a necessity, I would say. I think that culture, I came from a culture, I think 20 years ago in the industry, where it was almost expected of you to just work long hours every day,
yeah,
stay late, and it was presenteeism, right? I think there was a traditionally culture around presenteeism, and I think since COVID, that's changed. It's gone almost to some extent, um, but I don't think if COVID hadn't happened, it would have changed. I think it was very much kind of almost just like how businesses were run, and you had to be seen to be counted.
yeah. Very much culture.
Totally. And those people that worked late would almost be like, oh yeah, they're still here, And it was seen as a good thing, not a bad thing. Whereas now you see someone working late, I will say to them, like, do you need to really be here? Like, finish up, or, can you take it home, just have a break? If you need to sort of look at it again. You don't need to be in the office to do this. So I think that, yeah, I think that conversation has changed for the better, certainly. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those questions. I mean, about mistakes. The word mistakes is interesting because I don't know if it's true or not, but Nelson Mandela has been credited with saying he doesn't make mistakes. He just has life lessons. It's like,
Yeah.
you either win or you learn.
Yeah.
That was his attitude, and I'm not sure if he really said it or not, but he's been credited with that,
Yeah.
and it's an interesting way of looking at
Yeah.
things, isn't it? That
Yeah.
so, how do you feel about that in terms of your career and
Yeah.
being a senior leader?
Yeah.
Is there anything you would say? Yeah, I've learned from that. I'll do that differently now." Is there any sort of lessons that you would share?
Yeah, I would say so. And I agree. I do agree with that sentiment there. If that was Nelson Mandela's, I do agree with that. I think there aren't regrets, right? And I think
Yeah,
a regret is what I would call a mistake. Like you do something and you think that's something that I regret. That's a mistake. But otherwise, I think you have to have the freedom to fail, and that goes back to my point around psychological safety, right? And having that in the culture of the business.
yeah,
And I think to build that safety, people need to feel that they can make mistakes and therefore not be marched out the door the next day. And I think that's really important. I think for people to try, you need to try new things, but we all need to do that every day, right? I think that's how you grow. And so I think it's important to feel that you can try something and get things wrong. It's one of the conversations I had with Alex actually. I think when we met before I joined Manifest, and I said that I want the freedom to get things wrong as much as I get things right. And that's important to me. And just knowing that I've got that support from you, so that if something does happen, I'm not then worrying about, seeing you, in the corridor or something, and being taken to task over this. But it's like we can have a grown-up conversation about this, and just be like, right, okay, we tried that, it didn't work. What do we do? How do we move forwards? And I think obviously it turns on the extent of the mistake, obviously. And I think there is a limit to how far that kind of, I think that mindset will take you. But I think the spirit of that is important. And so, yeah, look, I think there's lots of learnings, certainly for me, and you grow. That's the whole point of this, right? Is that you grow, through your role, you grow in every role, and even if you're a senior leader, you still don't know all the answers. And you're not supposed to have all the answers. You shouldn't be expected to have all the answers because we are still learning as well. And so that's important for me. And I think I initially put myself under a lot of pressure. I always have done. So I think I just have quite high expectations of myself, but then also of others around me as well because of that. Um, and I think over time, as I've become more of a leader in the business rather than a manager, I've learned that I needed to kind of almost like adjust that expectation and actually be more supporting to people and understand there are different skill sets and capabilities and strengths, and it's finding out what those almost like unlocks are for people,
Yeah.
and then how you can help light a fire under them. And so that's been a shift for me, I would say, more so as I became a leader in the industry. I said probably about 5 years ago when I started moving to sort of more exec level roles. I it was a shift in the mind's eye almost, I would say, as to how I looked at the world and looked at sort of the workplace and the team, and just thinking about them in a different context, actually. Yeah, and just thinking,
Mm.
how can I help unlock this person's potential? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
what can I do to like, what are they brilliant at? What can I like, do to light a fire under that? Um, I then did a coaching qualification. I think because I was on this kind of journey myself, in terms of my leadership sort of style almost, and also understanding how to just be a better leader of people. Because ultimately we're in the people business. And so I then did a coaching qualification, which I think just helped train me more in that space actually, and just not having to always give the answers to people, but helping them find the answers. You know,
Yeah.
I think up
100%.
to that point, I was probably always quite quick to say, this is what we should do. And I've got, I've kind of got the answer of, oh, I know what we need to do here. And this is what it is. Versus hold back and say, so what do you think the options are? Right?
Mm.
What would you like to do at this point? Help almost like guide them to that. And that is a shift because it can sometimes be an old muscle that kicks in without thinking.
100%.
I had to train myself to not do that.
Yeah, that's a good example. There's a book called by Marshall Goldsmith, "What Got You Here Won't Get You There."
Yeah.
And in that book, have you heard of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the book, he lists 20 traits of senior leaders that, let's say, could be adjusted behaviors. And one of them is always telling people their opinion,
Yeah.
and even if it's not requested.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting, actually, as a senior leader, how difficult it can be to not necessarily give your view until you've heard somebody else's. Because it's very easy to shut somebody down. Nah, that's not going to work. That's a dead duck. That's not, and kill their idea off before you've even really listened to it.
Yeah.
But to actually, as you said, to coach them and
Mm,
actually say, oh, so why do you think that? And where did you get that from? What made you think that? And tell us some more. And uh, what's the evidence for it?
mm,
Without ever saying you agree or you don't agree. You don't need to say. And it's quite difficult as a skill to not say whether you think it's a good idea or not, but just explore and allow them to speak freely. Because as soon as you give an indication that you think it's a bad idea, they will kind of clam up a bit and they'll go cold.
yeah,
And you
that's
can
right.
kill them off completely, and then we'll come back with you with another gem.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse than seeing that happen as well. I think if you see that happen and it plays out in front of you, I think there's nothing worse than just thinking, God, I've just literally put someone's fire out, right? And that's the worst thing you can do because it takes, I think, a lot of more work to get that back again as well. And I think that's the realization. I think is become a leader in the business, rather than a manager. It's a very different skill set. And
Yes.
I think, a lot of people become accidental managers or accidental leaders. Because they're good at doing their one thing really well. They might be a brilliant copywriter or something. And then the next thing you know, they're leading a department, and it's like, hang on a minute, that's completely different from being a great copywriter,
Very different.
and they're not necessarily equipped for that. And yeah, I think even though my background has always been in client services,
Mm,
so I've always had to almost lead teams, on projects and accounts, leading a business, and everybody across the business is kind of ultimately working with me is very different still. It's very different.
mm,
You need to
absolutely.
grow up differently, I think, with that, and inspire people, and like I said, not always have the answers, but just be clear in terms of priorities and focus areas, and be able to be
Mm,
decisive. I think the biggest thing for me was being decisive, And I've always been quite a decisive person. I think that helped the fact
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I make decisions and move forwards, um, and sort of take the team with me as well.
How do you feel about do you as a senior leader, do you think numbers are an important part of leadership, knowing that having numbers? So we move away from emotion and not that emotion and passion isn't, and intuition and all that is not important, but what's what's the numbers? It's almost like when a member of staff comes in, can give you all the bluster in the world about I've done this, done that, this is not working, that's not working. But when you say to them, could you give me the numbers?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting, different conversation. So I just wondered, is that something that's important in what you do? Do you have sort of metrics or whatever you call it?
Yeah, yeah. And so when you say numbers, do you mean commercial?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
were KPIs, key
yeah,
performance indicators or
right.
some kind of indicators to say
Yeah,
factually, where are we with
yeah,
whatever it is the organization's trying to achieve or for a client or whatever.
yeah, yeah. So yes, I do think the numbers are important, but I don't live by them. Um, but they help inform, what we're doing and help inform where we are, where we're headed. So yes, we report on those, and we use those. Obviously commercially, I look at the numbers most days. Um, I report on those, up to the business as well, regularly. But with the team, everybody, if you're in a commercial facing role, everybody be aware of their commercial, performance, in terms of, the growth on their client accounts, the profitability, things like that, utilization. Obviously we need to have an eye on that because there's an operational reality to the business that certain team members need to be aware of.
Yeah.
In terms of people's kind of KPIs, we do set KPIs. We do try and make them as tangible as we can as well. So we will check on those. You have your one-to-ones every month with your line manager, and then outside that, every 6 months, there's a check-in on your objectives and how you're sort of tracking on that. And then going sort of even sort of more macro than that, we also measure employee NPS as
Tell
well.
us more.
Yeah, so we do a survey once a month, which goes out, and it's just that standard NPS question: would you recommend working at Manifest to a friend or colleague? And then it's a scale, so they will rate that from a 0 to 10 scale, and it's just a bit of a pulse check,
That's interesting. You do that monthly.
we do it monthly. Yeah, we do it
Interesting.
monthly. Yeah. And it's a pulse check on the sentiment of the team, right? And it's always, I always look at that, with a sense of like, how's it going to be this month? Is it going to be good? How are people feeling? There's also an option for some free form sort of like comments as well to be added. So it's always really good for me to see that. It's probably it's one of the favorite bits that I then report on, because I will then talk to that number and the questions or comments that might come through in our quarterly company meeting. So we run a quarterly town hall meeting, and I will capture all of those comments and the ultimate kind of like average score across the 3 months, and then report on that and stand there and talk about the numbers and talk about if it's gone up or down and any of the comments that might have come through, because it's really interesting because you really start to understand what the things are that are really bothering people or on their mind
Mm,
that you may not know, and they may not feel comfortable to talk about, may not want to, express it. But obviously when it's an anonymous survey, you can quite easily do that. So you get to really sort of know what some of the kind of like concerns might be that you can help solve as well.
yeah, yeah,
It's surprising what comes out of that. Sometimes there are quite big conversations, or it could be something as easy as, oh, can we just have some more monitors, in the studio for people to plug their laptops into? And it can be quite practical points. I'm like, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we
The
can
more
do
fruit.
that. That's easy. I'm happy with that. We can do that. Sometimes it's a bigger conversation, about a way of working or a process that we have, or the lack of something, that we need to think about. And so, yeah, we do that. We do that once more. So data is important, yes, and I think you use it to inform rather than make those decisions. But
Yeah, yeah,
always got to be a qualitative element to that, right? I think that's
yeah. What I'd certainly say it's best practice to talk to our staff, a temperature check on staff
yeah,
on a regular basis to engage them because, as you said, you don't know what's going on. Staff can get frustrated and something can small can become big if it's not dealt with. And if staff don't have an outlet to express it, it can be expressed in a more harmful sort of way. So yeah, I can definitely see that one. When you think of success in other people, so whether it's female senior leaders, people
Yeah.
of color, or just senior leaders anywhere, who would you when I if I use the word success, who would you well who comes to mind? Who do you think about when you think of successful senior leaders?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I frame success in different ways, I think, depending on where I'm looking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say in our industry, for example, I would say founders that have set up a really interesting agency proposition. And they believe in the vision that they can see for the business, and then they go out and set up a team around it and start to build a business around it. I think that for me is successful. And the agencies may not be the biggest, they may not be the most lucrative or profitable, but for me that's success, right? I think you see an opportunity for something and then you create a space for it. Um, I know how hard that is, and I think it's very easy for people to just sort of continue to do what they're doing and be in that sort of safety place, that place of safety versus, almost like stick your neck out. So I think that's interesting. There's a lot more of that happening now in the industry, certainly. Um, but I think, it's important to make sure that if you're building a business that the culture is that inclusive culture,
Mm-hmm.
feel they're valued as well. And you see some great sort of big agencies which are doing really well, but not necessarily they don't have the culture. And so I wouldn't say they're successful, right? And I think they've got the money, but they don't necessarily have the kind of culture to retain people and for them to feel valued. So it's interesting from that perspective. Then mean, outside in the world, I've always admired, Anita Roddick, and I think she's always someone that comes up for me when I have a conversation, at a dinner party about, people that inspire us. I think she's a pioneer, somebody that again just revolutionized an industry,
Yeah.
disrupted a whole category in industry and created a new one. Um, and I think she's incredible. And I read her book, Business as Unusual, in the early days as well. I remember I need to know her story. And I read that. I still have it on my bookshelf. Um, but yeah, I think she was a real pioneer. And, I'm a vegetarian as well. So I think, I always had a passion for kind of like, animals and obviously, stopping animal cruelty. I did it more for ethical reasons than anything else. And so she particularly resonated with me because of sustainability and obviously, CSR, and just obviously, stopping animal cruelty, which is ultimately, I think, the biggest thing that they did at that time,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was huge back then. So I think she's impressive. And on a personal level, I look at my family. I look at my dad, my mum. They came here as immigrants from India in the 1960s. And I think they came here with at that time £5. That was all they were allowed to bring.
Wow.
That's all they were allowed to bring
Wow.
with them, right? They set up a family here and obviously set up life here and obviously raised 3 children here. And so I look at that life and think, wow, that's successful, right? They've had to really work for that. And we've kind of grown up with that immigrant mentality as well. I think that kind of work ethic, and that mindset, which just stays with you. It's part of your upbringing. It's part of your
Yeah.
DNA.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So that's really interesting to hear, and it's nice to hear that people say that. Sometimes one of the people they look up for success. Success is a bit of a funny word because people can often, you can quote a billionaire or something like that,
Yeah.
but that's success in cash or money or in wealth. But as you said, all about values and things like
Yes.
that, which is
Right.
another thing altogether. Because you could be very successful, as in financially, and everybody you're hated.
Yeah.
I won't mention any names right now, but there's some people who might be
There
very
are.
wealthy right now, but I'm
But
not.
they're billionaires.
People
But when
might
you
more
say
want
they're
to punch them than to
successful,
want to shake their
exactly.
hand. So that's not
Yeah,
necessarily a great thing.
that's
Um,
right. Yeah.
so it's interesting, yeah, about inclusivity. So where's the future? So 5 years from now, where do you see the company or yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I see myself obviously staying within this role, within this business. Um, I want to grow. I just want to grow the business. I want to grow the team, grow the business, and I want us to become the most talked about agency. That's my goal, really. I think, and that's kind of why I joined. You know, because we're on a journey. We're on a journey to do that, and that is our mission. And I want us to be known for doing the most prolific creative work. You know, and it takes time to get there, but you know, we're building the team. You know, I've made hires over the last year since I've joined, and you know, looked at where the gaps are and where we need to fill and bring in different skill sets. So I'm excited about the opportunity, the creative opportunity. That's the reason I'm in this industry. You know, it's the creative opportunity that it brings to do really interesting work, you know, work that can make an impact as well. And so that's my goal really. My personal goal for the next 5 years is to grow this business to a point that we become that most talked about agency through the work that we're doing, and work with some really interesting brands as well to help them do that. Yeah,
No, I like that. No, that's really interesting. Be the most talked about brand. I love that.
yeah,
You talked about staff. Now, it'd be amiss of me if I didn't ask about this because senior leaders and business owners, if there's one thing they get very stressed about other than money, cash flow, is employment staff. In the sense that, it's an art to get the best out of people and recruit the right people. What lessons have you got that you could share with us about how do you get the best out of people? Well, first of all, how do you get the right person, and then how do you get the best out of them?
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I love that. I love the people side of the business, and I'm a people person, so I think that's always been a natural area for me where I just enjoy being around people. If I work on my own, I feel incredibly lonely. And the role can be lonely at times as well, obviously, because you know I'm the MD, and sometimes I find myself alone, sort of with my thoughts and having to solve sort of challenges, or at least just try and find a way forwards. But the people element for me is where it all comes together. You know, it's the team, right? You know, and I don't look at them as staff. I just look at them as the team. And we're all kind of a team working towards that kind of common objective. How do we find people? I mean, it's a process and it takes time. I think it's not something you want to rush into because you want to make sure you're making the right choices. And I mean, I certainly hire for manifest, not for a particular account or client. I will hire culturally first and foremost. Will this person fit into the team? First of all, obviously they need to do the job, but then will they fit into the team? And 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 be somebody that can add to the culture of the business. We call it a culture add. Um, because everybody that comes into the team, you want them to help build out the culture of the business as well. And so we see that as part of the process. And yeah, I tend to meet a lot of candidates, for the roles that we're looking for a chemistry meeting. And you just get a sense, I think, from them. And also, I think for them to understand us as a business as well, and who we are, and if they see themselves within the team. So it's a process, right? And I always meet people all the time. There's even if we're not recruiting, I'm still always just meeting people, and I just think there could be opportunities, right, that come from that, and it's interesting, and you meet somebody that might just inspire you, and I don't want to miss those moments.
Mm,
If somebody reaches out to me, I'll always be open to conversation and
yeah.
meet them. I think it's important to do that. And then in terms of sort of the team that we have, you know, we um, we do have a culture of kind of like candor, curiosity, and compassion. And so we try to make sure all of our engagements with our team use those kind of three levers in any of the conversations that we have. And I think it just means that we're almost all coming together like from the same position, which hopefully then avoids any kind of difficult conversations to almost like be like not productive and um negative actually. I think we try to help through that kind of approach.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I see my role in this and in the team, whether I like it or not. Ultimately, I define the culture of the business, and I think it took me a while to just understand that when I came into you know, my role at Manifest Sense is my first MD role, and I realized I was like, people are looking at me and they're taking cues from me on how I'm showing up, on what my values are and the things that I place importance on, and I could see that almost trickling down into like my leadership team and therefore into the rest of the business. And I was like, that's the impact that I'm having. And it's
Hmm.
important for me to make sure that I'm therefore sort of showing up in that way, in the way that I want the culture of the business to be. And for me to make a mark as well, and let's sort of, have that legacy within the business. Um, but you see that for your values, your behaviors, your tone as well, how you sort of speak and how you kind of like, just conduct really. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think all of those things are important. But I've also spoken to my exco team about this as well, and just said, well, this it doesn't just stop with me. This is with all of us, right? Our team are looking at us, for that almost role model, right? We're role modeling, what good leadership is, and they'll be looking to all of us for this. So it's just something as leaders that we all need to just be mindful of, and just be aware that we are having an impact, whether we like it or not. That's happening, in
Mm.
business. So I think as long
But
as we be consistent.
yeah, no, this I love that candor, curiosity, compassion. That's fantastic. And then you mentioned Exco. For people who listen, they might go, "What's Exco? What's
I'm
the
sorry.
Exco team?"
Yeah, so it's my exec team. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I have a team of four who work with me in leading the business, and they sit on the leadership team, the exec team, at Manifest. And between us, we lead the business from different parts of our skill sets.
Hmm.
We have strategic leadership, we have creative leadership, we have client leadership, and we have kind of growth as well within that. And then I oversee the exco, the leadership team, and I mean, they help me in the running of the business and sort of obviously just developing and actioning the strategies that we then execute.
Hmm.
Yeah.
In terms of your learnings, then, are you much of a reader? Do you listen to your audio, or do you like videos? How do you continue your sort of growth journey?
Yeah. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I'm a big fan of podcasts. So I get a lot from that, and I love listening to those because I could be on the go in the car, in the kitchen, making cooking, whatever it might be, I just have them on. I always have them on. It's kind of just my thing. And I love it. And I see that as sort of personal enrichment. And I just love it. And I hate it when it's interrupted, because I'm so absorbed and immersed that, when I have to pause it, sometimes when my daughter kind of comes in to talk to me, she's 10, so she'll just come in and start talking. I'm like, okay, I have to pause this for a moment so I can just make sure that I'm not losing any of it or missing it. But I do read books. I read physical books still. I love going into a bookshop um, and picking a book. I love that process. And I have a couple of books I read on the go and I dip in and out of them. So I don't sort of only ever read one book at a time. It depends on what I want at that point. Um, but I read sort of business books really more than anything else, just ones that will help me kind of, I think, develop
Any
further.
recommendations or ones you particularly
So
liked or
yeah,
like?
so I reread actually Shoe Dog recently by Phil Knight. So obviously that's been around for a little while. Um, but I just love the story. And it's been a little while, so I read that again, and I just found it was a book that I didn't want to put down. It's one of those books where you think, I just don't want to put this down, I want to keep reading it. I know obviously where it goes and what happens at the end of it, but I'm just so this journey is incredible, and there were so many moments where you just thought he wasn't going to make it, and it could have just disappeared in a moment. And so I think it was really fascinating. I think in that in itself is inspiring, to read that story and understand how the brand came about and the name and the logo and all of that, and then obviously how he built the business. And so I thought I'd recommend that to anybody. And it's
Mm.
been a long time, so a lot of people may have read it, but if you haven't, I would recommend Shoe Dog by
So
Phil.
share for those listening. What was the brand that came out? What was the company?
So what started off, so obviously Phil Knight is the founder of Nike,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but it started off as Blue Ribbon Sports. So that was their original name, and
Not
then
as sexy as Nike.
No, not at all. But what was really interesting is that he didn't like the logo when the logo was first designed, the swoosh logo. He didn't like it, and he just had to make it almost a distressed purchase because he was going into a meeting to present his business idea, and he needed a brand and a logo to show. So he just had to run with that. But when he saw it, he was like, I don't even know what this is. I don't really get it. I think he paid like $35 for it or something, from a freelance designer, um, all those years ago. But yeah, I mean that was the logo that was created back then, and then he grew to love it. And he says I didn't like it to start with, and he goes, but obviously he's grown to love it now, and it's become iconic. But yes, so Phil Knight was the founder of Nike. So that's his story.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
his biography, which is incredible. But I'm also reading. I like listening to Stephen Bartlett's podcast, The Diary of a CEO, and I'm reading his book as well, The Diary of a CEO. So I have that, and
Great book, great book.
I dip in and out of it. So I mean, I've got it here. And I've got lots of markers in the book where I'm like, that's great. I'm going to bookmark that, like, so I can come back and reference like some of this, which is incredible. I think it's really it's really powerful insights from people that he's met through his podcasts, which is great to kind of get in one place. And I like I said, I come back to that every so often. I'm like, what was that one
Mm.
again? I'll go back to that and read it again, or I'm still going through some of that, and then I'm also reading Never Split the Difference
All right,
by Chris
interesting.
Voss. Yes, he's an ex-FBI negotiator, and he's written a book around negotiation, unsurprisingly, um, and it's just incredible to just read his story. And I'm still reading that at the moment, so I'm kind of like, yeah, I dive in and out of this, and enjoy that as well. And that's more my train book because
Yeah,
it.
yeah. That they were both speakers at our BizX. A few years ago, we had the guy from Never Split the Difference, the FBI guy.
Yeah, Chris
That was
Voss.
yeah, that was a funny one because he didn't attend, but he did it over the internet. That was
Right.
a interesting, bit controversial. That one turned out to be, but
Okay.
nevertheless, it really interesting. Yeah, whole thing about negotiation and that. And
Yeah.
then Stephen Bartlett, they did an interview with him a couple of years ago in BizX as well. So that was pretty cool as well.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that, I just find, well, certainly Stephen Bartlett's podcast, again, it's something that I just put on it, and it's just like you're hanging out with somebody, you can just listen in on a conversation, which I just love.
Absolutely, yeah. My
I love.
wife knows me. My phone is usually in my pocket or somewhere, walking around the house,
Yeah.
listening to a YouTube video or podcast or something,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm just constantly like to listen. I think it's a waste of a moment if I
I
can't
know.
listen
I'm the
to a
same.
podcast if I'm
It's
driving the
solid
car, or
moments for me.
it's an
Yeah.
opportunity, isn't it?
I see it as that. I'm like, well, I can use this time to do something really like good for me, and it's going to inspire me and leave me feeling, better than I did, before I listened to it. So I agree with you. I love that, and I would do it more if I could, if I'm honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you a
Yeah,
little secret just between us. When I started in this coaching 14 years ago, I used to say I'm going to make phone calls. And my wife would come back and say, "How did you get on?" And I'd go, not so well," because I just couldn't motivate myself to pick up the phone. And
right,
I found T. Harv Eker,
right,
um, and I started to listen to his Secrets of a Millionaire Mind on
yeah,
audio
right.
when I'm getting ready. And by the time I was dressed, I was on fire. I was ready to take the world on.
That's good.
And
Yeah,
it's the only way I could get the courage or the energy to pick up the phone. It's really interesting how if you're not in the right mindset, it can really paralyze you in terms of productivity. It's all right saying, "Oh, I've got tasks, I've got a sheet, and I know what I'm going to do." But if
yeah,
inside something mentally is not there,
yeah.
you're not going to deliver.
That's right.
So
And I think everybody will probably know what that is for them,
yeah,
right?
they got to find it. I ask
Yeah,
business owners and senior leaders,
yeah,
what
yeah,
gets you in the zone?
yeah,
And I ask them to replicate it because sometimes they forget what used to get them in the zone. They're
yeah,
now a little bit flat or whatever. And I say, what used to fire you up in the morning? What used to make you feel, like a superstar? And I said, we need to bring that back. And
yeah.
sometimes it was they stop going to the gym or they stop playing
That's
golf
right.
or stop doing something and they just
Right.
found themselves low energy. And I said, well, we need to get that back somehow.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think for me, I think you start to understand this more about yourself, don't you? As you kind of like, live with yourself for longer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I know for me, I have to move every day, and I just physically have to be doing something physical for me to feel like I'm balancing my kind of like, sort of mental kind of like needs to some extent. Um, so like whether that's going to the gym, whether it's going out for a long walk, if I'm working from home, I need to make sure I'm outdoors at some point and going for a long walk. So I'm moving. And for me, movement's really important. So I mean, I do love going to the gym. I do that when I can fit that in. But if I can't, then I will still do something else. Because for me, I'd rather do that than go and sit in front of the TV, for example.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right? I know that for me, that's the thing that helps me just reset and rebalance, internally.
No, great.
Yeah.
Is AI is AI is I almost didn't ask it, but I'd be amiss if I didn't ask about it these days.
Yeah.
Is AI having an impact on your industry or your business?
Yeah, it is. I'd say it's a positive impact. Yeah. Um, we use it daily, and I think you can use it for good. And I think lots of people talk about it because they're scared of it, and there's a lot of kind of like fear mongering around it. But I think the reality, the applications of it that I'm seeing are really helpful and productive, and it's helping reduce a lot of I guess, the admin in the team, and helps us kind of run processes, and I think, research, for example, when we're, either working on a client or on a pitch, being able to use it for that reason as well to help kind of almost like, help with qualifying, sort of new business, or just, yeah, getting very pointed sort of research back, which will help inform your strategy. Um,
Mm,
we use it for performance reviews as well. So we've got our own sort of platform that we use called Multiply. And we've got a script set up on Multiply that we can use to put our performance review documents through there. And it helps generate almost like key themes, from the 360 feedback plus people's self feedback as well. So I think it just helps that kind of like initial phase of work. You then still need to do the qualitative piece on that, which is obviously then digest it, understand it, and then think about, right, what does this actually then mean? How do we make this actionable? But it's been really useful for that, I would say, consolidation of information and
mm.
finding that admin process. So I think it's been positive overall.
Is there a particular platform you use for that? Was it Multiply?
Multiply, yeah, yeah. We use a platform called Multiply. So we have a bespoke interface that we use. So within that, we've fed in our mission, vision, sort of purpose, values, and some of the kind of processes that we use at Manifest and how we do those, how we've kind of codified some of our ways of working, so we can then almost use Multiply as an agent, that knows the business as well. So it's been really interesting and really really effective, I would say. Certainly, yeah. I think it helps prioritize where the high value work is for us versus work that can be automated. And it's basically automation to some extent. And so it just helps us with the automation side of tasks, therefore
Mm,
focusing and spending more of our time on where the high value is as a team.
brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant. So, in closing, really, just any for other senior leaders out there who are running organizations, doesn't it can be commercial, can be public sector, could be wherever, but senior leaders, is there any messages you would leave to say, these are the things that I think keep me most effective?
What I would say what keeps me most effective, I think, is not feeling that I have to solve everything.
Yeah,
And I I have learned this in the process of opening up and talking to people more, rather than feeling that it's a lonely place and that you have to just, solve all of the problems of the business, or any of the challenges that you might be sort of foreseeing. And so, yeah, I think that for me is important, I would say. So I think it's only when I started talking to other leaders, everybody's like, yeah, God, it's really lonely. Like, and literally everybody's saying the same thing, but nobody's almost talking about that.
yeah,
And you hear that phrase, and I don't like to use it, but like lonely at the top, and I don't like to think about that as, I don't think there ever really is a top. But you hear that, but no, it doesn't feel like it's really been solved. And people don't talk about it. They just don't. It was almost like having to just show that you're you can do the job, right?
Mm,
And I think the reality is that, I've learned, through the process, either I use my network, I have conversations with them, I've approached other MDs in other agencies that I don't know, but I've almost reached out to them, and just said, hey, like, let's get together. It'd be great to have a chat and just, see how things are going for you. And it's not surprised me how open people are to that. And they're like, yeah, let's chat, let's get a coffee. I think everybody wants that person to be like, how's it going for you guys? Are you facing this too? Are you, and it's just shared learning, shared challenges.
shared learnings, yeah.
It really makes a difference. So I would say that more than anything. And I wasn't given this advice when I came into this role, but I would say that's probably a big thing for me. Um, and using my leadership team as well, to discuss and not always feel that you have to have all the answers, for them as well. But say, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And that's the whole point of having them, right? And then, together we're stronger. And so I would say that. And yeah, don't. I say in your first sort of 6 months of the role as well, don't rush into any big decisions. Um, take time, take the time to get to know the team, individuals, and the business, and really wrap your arms around it. Um, for me, it was just focusing on that actually to start with, to get a real good measure of it, and don't rush in sort of bedding as well. I would say
Yeah,
that's really my advice.
brilliant. Well, Rowena, it's very easy talking to you. I could talk to you all day. But I just want to
Right.
say thank you very much for taking the time to share your wisdom with us. I'm sure the people listening got lots of little nuggets from you, some book recommendations as well, that are great
Yeah.
books. So yeah, just say thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Asari. It's been a pleasure as well. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.